So thank you everybody for coming today. Welcome to the C&I Advisory Committee meeting for February 16th, 2021. I mentioned to some people who were on a little bit early that our chairperson, Susan Candio Hernandez, is not going to be with us today. Luckily, we have a very capable vice chair, Tushar, and so he and I are going to be working together on the meeting, and I think we've got it organized and we're ready to go. So Tushar, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, and I'm going to show my screen and run the slides so that you've got those to refer to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for coming, and yeah, we'll wait till the slides are up.
All right, are you able to see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Okay, so today we actually have no oral communications, so we'll get straight into the agenda. And then so for the agenda, first we'll be looking at the minutes from our last meeting on January 19th. After that, we'll be going over an update of our core adoption process as we discussed during our last meeting. Once that's over, we'll transition to our new topic, which is going to be focusing on intervention. We'll take about 40 minutes to discuss intervention, and once that's over, we'll be discussing the components of the subcommittee that we formed last month in a decision to review resources on racism. And then finally, we'll end with suggestions for future agenda items and also information to be taken to the Equity Committee. And just as a brief reminder, those were our norms. And then also for our...
Hang on a minute. What do I have going on here? I'm giving you good challenge, Tushar. You got to keep up, right, as these slides move through. All right, let me try again here. Okay.
Yeah, so these are our norms as always, and then now we'll be going over last meeting's minutes. So I'll give you, or actually you should have received the minutes in our last email. So does anyone have any changes or suggestions for the minutes? Ms. Rebecca Herrera? Oh, no? Okay. Anyone? Okay, if not, can we get a motion?
I'm so sorry, Tushar. Yes, I raised my hand and then immediately clicked on another screen and couldn't figure out how to unmute myself.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for your patience. I want to thank Sid for taking the minutes and notes last time. The only adjustment that in reviewing the video, the motion at the end on the subcommittee was to create that subcommittee on anti-racist curriculum based on the presentation. So I just wanted that reference since it has to do with anti-racist curriculum and instruction and going in that direction instead of just, for example, reviewing the resources that we have, which is how it's phrased in the minutes.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion to change the language of how the subcommittee is created to reflect that it's for anti-racist curriculum and instruction rather than just anti-racist resources?
I can second that. This is Arti.
Okay, thank you. And now we can vote. So all in favor, raise your hand.
Tushar, just a point of clarification. Are we voting to approve the minutes as amended, or did you want to have people vote?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So we can vote to approve your change, like the motion to change the meeting, the amendment.
Sorry, so did you want to take one vote now specifically on the amendment, or did you want to see if anyone else has suggested amendments and then just take one vote?
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Are there any other amendments? Okay, so then we can vote on your amendment. So all in favor of making that amendment, raise your hand.
So not being able to see with the screen up, was there anyone
Oh,
who wanted to vote in opposition of approving those amended minutes? If you could raise your hand if you were in opposition. Otherwise, we'll have that as unanimous. Okay, all right, awesome.
okay, so that amendment was passed unanimously. Thank you. So if there are no other amendments, then we can, are there any objections to approve last meeting's minutes with the amendment? Or are there any other amendments left? Okay, so then we can say those were also passed unanimously, and we can go back to the presentation.
Great. Right. Thank you very much, Tushar. Well done. Well handled. As Tushar mentioned, we're going to try to do quite a few things in today's meeting. And so it's nice that we're moving so quickly and efficiently through the presentation or through the meeting. I am going to start sharing my screen again. All right, so the first thing that I'd like to do is just catch you up a little bit on where we are on the core adoption work that we're doing. Supplemental adoption hasn't really changed. We're in the process of having the supplemental adoption team read the 5 books that have been recommended. We'll have a meeting right after spring break and make a decision on those. But I did want to update you on where we were on the core novel process. So the first step that we needed to do was we needed to pick the members who are going to be part of that committee. And thank you very much to Victoria, who spoke to her membership and has put together almost a full slate of people for us. Our first meeting is going to happen on the 24th of February. And then we have basically 1 meeting for each month remaining this year. And we know that we will continue on into next year because this is really a large project and it deserves to be done thoughtfully and slowly. So we've taken care, or close to taking care of step 1, selecting committee members. Once we have our committee, we are going to, as a first step, we're not going to start right in talking about books right away. Instead, we're going to talk about, as a student moves through the 6 years of secondary education in Fremont, so from 7th grade to 12th grade, what are the kinds of literature that we want them to be exposed to over that span of 6 years? And then from that, we're going to create a rubric that allows us to assess each piece of literature based on how well it meets those criteria. Then what we'll do, we'll take a look at our current novels, figure out whether they are still of value or whether they maybe don't fill holes the way we need them to. Assuming there's some space for additional novels, which I really imagine there will be, we will go hunting for additional novels to round out that criteria. And then our final step will be that we will propose the new slate of core novels to the school board. And as I mentioned, I expect that it will take us through the spring of this year and into next year as well, with the goal of taking things to the board sometime maybe late winter or early spring next year. Supplemental novels remain available to teachers during this process, so I don't want you to be worried that a teacher who is interested in diversifying what they work with their students this year has to wait for the core novels to change. They don't. They can work with the supplemental novels, and we've already approved quite a few that we're excited about. So there is lots of diversity available for teachers already. And Tushar is going to share the next couple slides with you.
Yeah, so as you might remember, back in our December meeting, we discussed some of the recommendations we had for the requirements for core and supplemental novels. And those, everything from December is shown in the black text on the slide. And then also we revisited this topic after the presentation by the FUSD Alum Association in January. And then we added to our recommendations and changed them up a bit. So everything from the January meeting is in blue. So just to quickly go over some of the modifications we made. So in December, we had discussed how we wanted diversity of authors, characters, races, nationalities, experience, perspectives, etc. And then we also added in socioeconomic status and to discuss what diversity means. Then also in the diverse and different genres, we had novels, poetry, drama, short stories, and then we also added picture books, just in general having a very wide array of different genres of literature to choose from. We also decided to increase the amount of variety between classics and also newer literature. And then the rest of these bullet points were the same as from December. There is an opportunity for students to understand and respect the perspective and intelligence of others. There are real world experiences that are also relatable, and there are complex and rigorous universal and historical themes. And this is just some more feedback, a continuation of the last slide. So we also added that there should be teacher training and support needed. And then in addition, including creating internationally diverse student project groups and addressing sensitive topics. We also decided that in addition to connections across subject areas, such as history, we added in arts and commemorative months. From December, we had variation across a grade level and a periodic review of the supplemental and core novel adoption list. And then in January, we added a couple things from the presentation, like the use of a reference to existing rubrics, like that one from the New York University, also a connection to core literature for elementary schools, and then opportunities for the committee to understand the rubric deeply. So in general, just establishing that connection between the core novel process adoption committee and the C&I Advisory Committee.
All right. Thank you very much, Tushar. I'm going to stop sharing now. And ask if there are any questions or comments that you'd like to make about the core novel process. One of my commitments to you was each month I was just going to keep you updated on where we were on it. We won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I just want you to know, because your committee and the adoption committee are kind of working hand in hand on this. Any questions from anybody?
Victoria has her hand up.
Oh, I see. Okay, Victoria, I'll take you. And then Shilpa, I saw your hand go up as well. And Arti, I saw your hand. So let's do Victoria, then Shilpa, and then Arti.
Thank you, Kim. And I really do want to thank you for your thoughtful articulation of the backward mapping, because I think that's really great for people to hear. Kids don't learn, and go along their educational path by accident. And so you're being really thoughtful about that discussion. And so I think that's really great for us to know. On secondary, because we're in this middle school transition and eventually sixth grade will be included, are you thinking that we'll include sixth grade in this, or will that always be kind of separated off in that sort of planning?
It's a great question, and we are a little bit sort of on with a, on foot on each of two horses, if you'll excuse the circus metaphor right now. Our sixth grade students currently learn their language arts from the benchmark curriculum, and the benchmark curriculum spans from kindergarten up through sixth grade. However, when you look at the Common Core standards, the Common Core standards span from kindergarten through fifth, and then 6, 7, and 8 are grouped together, and there's a continuum of learning that would happen. So we're in this odd spot right now where our materials really align with the grades below sixth grade, but our standards really align with the grades above sixth grade. Lots of things are going to come together over the next few years. We're going to get to the end of our benchmark adoption, so there could be the opportunity to make some shifts there. We'll eventually get all our sixth graders into middle schools, and then that will provide a consistency there. So I can easily imagine at some point we might align the 6th grade novels with what's happening with 7th and 8th grade. And be assured that as we're thinking through this process, we are keeping 6th grade in mind. Even though we're not adopting for 6th grade, we're keeping those 6th grade standards in mind and the needs of those 6th grade students. And so soon it will be, rather than that 6-year continuum, it'll be a 7-year continuum. Yeah. All right, Shilpa.
I think you answered it. I was asking about the 6th graders only, so that took care of my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Arti.
Hi. So my question isn't directly related to what we just discussed, but in the realm of diversity. You know, we talk a lot about diversity as a society, but the advantages of being diverse, like if you, like a comparison, like in a homogeneous population versus a diverse population, really an advantage to have a diverse community to even start with, because we talk about it, but so what? You know, for a lot of people, like, what's in it for me? Like, I'm okay in my homogeneous little group that I like because I'm just comfortable in it. But I feel like it's not part of this, like what we're talking about as a curriculum to imbibe, but I think it is a point to bring even to kids or teachers when they're teaching it, because it solves a bigger problem that is probably not necessarily curriculum, but conditioning.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, excellent perspective, and very important. I agree that we present this from the positive side of there is such a benefit to us to being so diverse, as opposed to, well, we're acknowledging diversity, so now we're going to talk about you and then we're going to talk about you, but rather just the gloriousness of the whole and the variety there. So thank you for bringing that point up. I appreciate it. All right. Okay, well, so that's our update on what's happening there, happening with the core novels. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to move into talking about the topic that is our topic for today's meeting, based on the survey that you guys did for us. And that is the idea of intervention. So I'm going to once again share my screen. And what I'd like to do to kick off our conversation about intervention is I'd actually like to take us back to this graphic that we talked about. I think it was probably in our first meeting, where we talked about how there really is a fundamental difference between equality and equity, and that our goal as a school district needs to be not simply equality, which you see, you know, in the picture on the left, where everybody has a box to stand on, but for some people, the box doesn't help. They still can't see over the fence, versus the idea of equity, where everybody has the number of boxes that it takes for them to be able to see over the fence. And so as we're talking about intervention, intervention is an approach to helping students get the number of boxes they need in order to be able to see over the fence. So intervention isn't something that every student will be exposed to equally. It isn't something that a student who needs it, let's say in math, might also need it in language arts. They might or they may not, because they're very different subjects. And we all know we all have strengths and we all have challenges. So the idea of equity is to be specific about figuring out what it is that students need and giving them those extra skills or tools or time or whatever it might be in order to make sure that they're successful. Share a model with you here, and then we've got two of our very own members, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Gonzalez, who are going to be talking to us about what's actually going on in the schools that they run and they are familiar with. But first, I want to talk to you about this model. And it's called a multi-tiered system of support. You may have heard the acronym MTSS. And here's basically what a multi-tiered system of support says. If you'll look at the diagram, the base tier, that tier 1, the red tier, is our core program. It is what's received by all of our students. Everybody gets the core. And if you look to the left, you'll notice that there's a bulleted list there that indicates that this MTSS pyramid, can really apply in 3 different aspects in education. Certainly, we immediately think about academics, that students learning academics is an essential piece of school. But there are other pieces of what happens for a student in school that actually are every bit as important. One is their social emotional growth and learning, and one is the behavioral aspect of things. And this pyramid can actually be applied in any of those 3 domains. But let me take academic as my first example. So your tier 1, your core classroom instruction, let's say it's going to be a science lesson about the fact that gas molecules expand to fill the space they have. I'm just coming up with something crazy here, but that initial teaching would be given to everyone in the class. And then there would be some sort of a way for a teacher to know which students had understood the concepts and which students hadn't understood that. It could be a test, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a conversation that a teacher has with a student. It could be watching students work on a lab experiment that makes use of this particular component of science. And from that, a teacher would say, you know what, there's a small number of people who don't seem to have yet had this make sense to them. So I'm going to think of them as my tier 2 students at this point. And I may do some targeted instruction with them. Maybe I take them aside as a small group and we go back and review some of what was in the tier 1. Maybe I give them an opportunity to ask some questions. Maybe I think of a different approach, maybe a different example or a different way to explain things to help that small group of students make sense of the materials. And from that tier 2 intervention, most people are going to begin to understand the concept, and they're going to basically return to that sort of tier 1 level of understanding whatever it was that was taught. You've done small group intervention, there may remain as an even smaller group of students who need a little more intensive intervention. So maybe they need some one-on-one work, maybe they need to partner with a tutor, maybe you pair them up with a classmate who can help them along. That top tier of the MTSS pyramid is a more intensive intervention, and you can see that that tier is small, indicating that it's a small number of students. The tier 2 layer is a little bit bigger, indicating it was a few more students, and tier 1 is the largest tier, which indicates that it was all our students. So the example that I've given you there is kind of a weak academic example. The same can be said of social emotional learning, that there are social emotional lessons and social emotional agreements that we have in schools, and the core social emotional expectations are presented in tier 1. Then if we have a way to identify that there are some students who maybe for whom that hasn't made perfect sense yet, we move them to a tier 2 level of approach. And then there may be some students who work to a tier 3. And then our goal, of course, is that students ultimately work their way back down the tiers because of the level of intervention we've been able to give them. Same things are true with behavior. We set behavioral expectations for students. Sometimes we have a smaller group of students who kind of want to push the boundaries on that, may need a smaller intervention. And then every so often there's a student who needs really that intensive behavioral intervention. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing at this point and just see if anybody has any questions about this basic idea of intervention. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move into hearing from Mr. Lewis and from Mr. Gonzalez about what's going on in the 2 schools that they oversee. And then it'll give you a lot more idea of some specifics for intervention. So are there any questions, or anybody want to add thoughts, any conversation at this point. No. Let's see. Oh yeah, Vivek, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I didn't have this on my calendar, so I'm driving, so I can't turn my video on. One comment that my experience as a teacher back in, as a, let's say, teaching assistant in college, we had one of the interventions that I had to also actively seek out was students that actually grasped the material, okay, but they were not quite challenged by the material, and hence they got bored, and then their performance starts to drop. So the intervention is not only to explain, but also perhaps to find people that kids that are not challenged enough, and then challenge them so that they stay engaged in the classroom.
Yeah, great point. There are people for whom that tier 1 instruction isn't at the right level, whether it's too challenging or whether it's not challenging enough. So thank you, Vivek, for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Victoria.
Thanks, Kim. I guess I'm wondering if we don't normally call that enrichment versus intervention. So maybe we can have that more of that conversation another time. But I think after hearing about what's happening at the couple school sites, even though it's virtual, I would love to hear district-wide, because LCAC approved some district-wide online interventions. And so I'm wondering if that's something in addition to what our couple principals have had going.
Yeah, let's hear what they've got to say, and then if there are additional pieces that we need to talk about, absolutely. All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Principal Walt Lewis, who is our principal at Centerville Junior High, and he's going to talk about the kinds of things that are happening there at Centerville with their MTSS systems. So Walt, I'm going to go ahead and start showing the slides, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right. I'm sorry. Are you're presenting though? You're doing the slides. Oh, great.
I'll present. Yeah, that way you can see, if there are questions and such as that.
Great. It's great to be here this evening. I love this committee, to be honest. And quite honestly, I'm Walt and not Jorge, even though tonight we dressed alike. We look like twins, except for he's younger, better looking, and has more hair. So that's how you can tell us apart, okay? But my apologies. Next time we'll coordinate. I'll wear something bright. I promise that. But anyway, I would like to talk to you a little bit about how we approach this multi-tier system of support. And this first graphic is just something I like to really utilize. These words, all means all, really is something that is in most people's vision or mission statement and that sort of thing. But to me, Ms. Kelly or Kim was starting out this conversation about equity. And one of the ways that I look towards equity, or one of the definitions that I utilize and I try to work with my staff to utilize, is that equity really means equitable outcomes for all students. We really want to see every student be college and career ready at their end of their tenure here in Fremont Unified School District. Now, quite honestly, there's a lot of ways to define equity, and that is only one way, but I think it's the way that it fits in with the multi-tier system of support. Ms. Kelly, you're going to have to look at time, because I'm a talker, and unfortunately, I can talk until people are falling asleep. So you make sure that you shut me up when you need to, and we'll move on over to Jorge. But anyway, if we can go to the next slide, that'd be great. One thing Kelly said is that, the biggest tier, and we invert the pyramid because this is the most important tier. The most important tier is in-class instruction. Most of your intervention or even enrichment really does happen in class instruction. Our very most important focus should really be what's happening in class. you know, not only the curriculum, not only the content, but, you know, how are we training new teachers? How are we doing, you know, helping teachers become the best teachers they can be for every student in class? But when you look at a tiered program like this, that really does cover about 80 to 85% of the students. Then you start looking at what does tier 2 equal? And we're going to go into some examples of what those are. Tier 2 really equals to be about 10 to 15% of the students. And tier 3, our most intensive intervention really ought to be only about 5 to 10% of our students. Now, one thing that Ms. Kelly did say is that students should not be stuck in a particular tier of intervention. We never want to have intervention lifers. We want students to be able to move in and out of interventions as they need them. So that really does mean you need to have a system that's very flexible. And for us, one of the big things that we do is flex time. It is our 4 times a week, half an hour a day time to intervene with students based on the data and based on grouping students in certain subjects to be able to get the help they need. Now, one of the questions was about, well, how does that impact enrichment? And really, when we're talking about that kind of intervention, there is also the opportunity during that time to provide some enrichment. The way that we do it is to allow students to be able to sign up for different enrichments if they don't need a mandatory intervention. We can go to the next slide. I can kind of show that a little better. And feel free to ask questions. You're going to have to make yourself get a word in edgewise. I promise I know a lot about this stuff, and so I love to share it. But feel free to ask a question or call me a liar or do whatever you need to do, and we'll get, you know, I'll try to answer it as best I can. So what I would like to tell people is that we really split the model kind of in two. The right side of the model really is teacher team guided interventions, or what we like to call academic interventions. This is the part that teachers really are responsible for and that they should be responsible for. You know, this is their expertise. I'm not an expert in every subject. I like to think I am, but I know I'm not. I have wonderful curriculum expertise that can really help you know, with the interventions in that tier 1 and that tier 2. On the other side is the behavioral and social emotional interventions. So everything you see in green really is what the teachers are responsible for, and everything else are things that other people are responsible for. Now, I want to warn you, one thing people like to do is look at all of these interventions and say, well, these are the interventions that just happen at Centerville all the time. And that's not exactly true. These interventions come in and out as resources are available and as needs are there. And so what I don't want us to get into the habit of is thinking of these interventions as just static interventions. It really is based on the needs of the students. And if we want to go to the final slide so we can give Jorge his opportunity to also share. So these did not translate very well for some reason. I'm sorry. If you would really like better slides that have more of the text that looks really good, just let me know. I'm happy to send them to you. But on this final slide, what I really wanted to show that in between each intervention tier, there really is a decision-making point about how does a student move into that additional tier. And between tier 1 on the academic side, it is teacher teams that make a decision about whether a student needs tier 2 intervention. And that might be something like, you know, maybe after-school tutoring, or maybe academic support classes. Sometimes that's what we do, is provide an additional support class. Or even, hey, they need to be in a mandatory intervention to be able to, you know, during our flex time, during that half-hour time, to be able to meet that standard. Our goal in our flex time and in our interventions is every student meets every standard. That really is a really big goal for us. And we utilize data to be able to determine which students that's going to be most effective for. On the other side, we typically use our cost team. And our cost team really is a group of individuals that really do come from a lot of different backgrounds and can provide some insight into some of those behavioral and social emotional needs. And then those are some decision points about what the things that we're going to do with that. So there's a lot. One of the things that I wanted to mention was that we also have, we also try to utilize some of the our behavioral interventions that are that are restorative practice interventions. We really want to incorporate as many restorative practices with our students, because we know, only punitive approaches really don't work for every student. And, oftentimes it doesn't work for, it doesn't have the desired effect that we would like to have it. Tier 3 really is our most interventions that require a lot of not only resources to be able to apply to those Tier 3 students, but really expertise that students need oftentimes for social and emotional kinds of supports, oftentimes for behavioral supports, behavioral contracts, sometimes working with a specialized person, or sometimes on the behavioral side, working on with a one-on-one counseling or doing some intensive academic counseling. So, that's just a broad overview in the short time that we have to kind of give you an example of this. My goal yearly is to pull this out and say, hey, okay, so based on the needs of the students right now, what do we have and what do we need to change? This year, we are going to have some challenges with some of our interventions, that we've typically used, especially with our academic support courses. As one of the challenges that we're facing this year is we have been a Title I school, and Title I funding for our district has been reduced substantially. So am I concerned about that? No. What I am very confident is that we're going to be able to look at the overall program and be able to implement some interventions that, to me, for every student need to be, if a student needs intervention, it really needs to be a mandatory intervention, and it needs to be during the day. Because we know, even though after school tutoring, after school homework groups, that sort of thing has some impact, the biggest impact are those things that we can do during the day. The biggest challenge is often balancing that with a teacher's duties and responsibilities and their own workload. We never want to make this something that is a burden on the teacher, rather that teachers really see as a benefit to their students and something that is manageable and something that, that is successful. Teachers do not mind, when we have some interventions that they can see the success for students. It's really, it's really kind of a balancing, but most teachers really do want to put in things because, like all educators, they always want their students to be as successful as they can. All right, whew. Anybody else tired? Just me? All right. Well, anyway, with that said, what I want to leave you with is that, intervention is not something that is a haphazard kind of, let me just put it in as we're going along. It's a system. It is something that is really important to remember, is a system based on data and based on student need. And that's really the way that I approach it. That's the way I hope all of my staff approach it. And that's what we're constantly working towards, because, every student sometime in the school year might need some assistance. We're very cognizant that sometimes that our intervention, what I like to call our intervention resistant students, need more. And, sometimes they need a lot more. And so we have to just be constantly reviewing that. Now, I will give you about 2 or 3 minutes for any kinds of questions before we need to go on to my colleague. All right, so that says I overwhelmed you. What I'm going to offer to you is I'm going to, feel free. If you have any questions for me ever, just let me know. Siddhartha.
Thank you very much. That was great. I was wondering in this, what's the role of parents, given particularly this year being COVID, they're stuck at home, or even not this year, but any other year? What's
You
the role
know,
of
so,
parents here?
you know, the parent communication is absolutely essential, and it's absolutely essential to have a parent team, right? And that is especially true in middle school or junior high school, as students are oftentimes trying to push parents away. It's even more important for parents to be in the lives of our students, right? So what our approach is to make a team with the parents, continuously keep in communication with the parents and receive their support. Never have I worked in a school district where it hasn't been as more important as it is right now while we are in shelter in place to have that team with parents, quite frankly. There has never been a time that it has been more important to get the parent support and to have that parent communication with parents. Because, you know, we're not right there with the students. Parents are typically, or if they're not right there with the students during the day, they certainly are in the evenings trying to manage this system with their students. I think one of the things I'm never going to say there's a lot of things that came out of the shelter in place that are super positive, but one of the things that is that I think the relationship between teachers and parents has been stronger than I have ever seen. And I certainly appreciate our parent support and our parent teammates in helping their personal students to be successful, but also helping other people's students to be successful. You know, I'm hearing all of the time about that, you know, how parents are concerned about those students we're having a difficult time to connect with. So, you know, for me, parent support is everything. I don't feel we can do it without parent support. Good question, though. Trustee Zhang.
Mr.
I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
I can now, yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Well, I thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed your the details. But here's the thing. I mean, is this program already in place?
Well, so this is not new. I'm going to tell you, I was a director in my last district, correct? I was a director of accountability. And one of my jobs was to ensure that every school had a really functioning tiered support, right? So teachers in the past have always done intervention. The difference with a system of interventions is that it is exactly that. It's a system of being able to identify students. Teachers are going to do interventions no matter, you know, no matter if we have a system or not. And what I often tell teachers is that, look, you are doing these interventions already, and they're doing them during their lunch times. They're doing them after school. They're contacting parents to get that intervention. They're already doing those interventions. And what a system really does is provide some conclusive data and provide support for the teachers to get that. So yes, is it something that is it new? It's not new. It's in almost every district I've been in. You'd think I can't hold a job. I've been in a lot of districts. It's not true. And by the way, I'm not going anywhere. I love Fremont. But this model is not something that we came up with. This is actually something that is a national model. You know, every school does it to a varying degree, right? But every school does have interventions, and I would like to think every school utilizes a pyramid like this just to organize their thinking. This is why we use a pyramid. It's not, if I didn't have a pyramid, it's not like I wouldn't be doing interventions. This pyramid just helps me organize my thoughts around that and to make some really good decisions about when students need to move into different tiers.
Mm-hmm. And so do we have a tracking system? We can see that how we measure the students' progress. And well, I think also it's very important. And
Right. So typically it's, you know, it's common formative assessment. So there wouldn't be a tracking system to that because that's the thing that teachers are implementing at the school site. But there are also some of those decision and data points are some of the different assessments that we utilize throughout the district. So there are some of those, you know, and I also know that Steve Musto, our director of assessment, is, trying to increase the amount of, well, not increase the benchmarks, but really kind of make more consistent the types of benchmarks that we're utilizing for comparative purposes. So I do know that he is working on that as well. The one part that I think I'm really excited about is, being able to identify universal screeners at the beginning of the school year for students, for us to identify what help they might need. But typically, a lot of the data really comes from classrooms and from teachers working together to determine what assessments they want to utilize to be able to see how they're doing on the standards. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, with that said, I do want to turn it over to my twin brother there, Jorge. So, sorry, Jorge, I left you behind. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and let me just say, Walt, thank you so much for the great introduction and for bringing it way down to details and understanding it at the depth you do and sharing it with us. I really very much appreciate that.
Don't worry.
Well, it is something I'm passionate about, so thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Don't worry. I will contact the principal. Okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
We're going to transition now to hear from Mr. Jorge Gonzalez, who is the principal of Patterson Elementary. So where Mr. Lewis was talking to you about how intervention looks at the junior high level, Mr. Gonzalez is going to share with us about what it looks like at the elementary level. And I think you're going to discover that there are both some similarities and some things that are kind of unique to elementary. So give me just a second and I will show your slides.
Thank you. All right, so for us, I did not do the pyramid. I think that I left that for Principal Lewis to do. I put it more into a 3 different tiers with some of the things that some of the interventions that we have in place. We can just go back.
Yeah, I apologize. Okay,
Well,
I think we're good now.
So if you look here, we have some different interventions. Tier 1, again, it goes for everyone. And as we move to tier 3, that's when we have that really targeted intervention for our students. You can go ahead and read them yourself. I won't take the time for that. But the time that I want to use is to really look at interventions and how important it is in elementary school. When I work with a great team of teachers and they're very dedicated and they'll do anything for their students. And that is something that helps us a lot because in order for us to have a successful intervention team, we need to have teachers who are willing to do the work because it is a lot of work to implement some of these interventions. But at the same time, they're also building relationships with our students and building relationships with the home, which really open the doors for us to collaborate with families and really bring them into the school and really focus on supporting our students. Another important thing is that as we look at our students, especially when we're thinking of TK, first grade, and especially the primary grades, and even some of the intermediate grades as well in students, some of our students do not know how to really communicate, how to advocate for themselves. So our teachers have to really look at the data that they're receiving from their from assessments. They really have to look at the behaviors they're observing in the classroom, as well as the interactions our students are having with peers, and really focusing on the patterns they're seeing and see if there are any areas of concern. And once the areas of concern are identified, we have to look at what it is that we're going to do for that student. Once we realize the interventions in place, we need to realize that not all interventions will work for every child. We can try different interventions and some might be successful for a child while they will not work for another student. So we need to be mindful of that as we begin to really bring the student forward. We have a cost team, and that is the way we at Patterson bring students we're concerned about with regards to academics or also social emotional concerns as well. So we meet as a cost team with a teacher, and we have our counselor as well, and we have our school psychologist as part of the team, and we really try to look at how we can support our student. And once we do that, we develop a plan that we share with the teacher. The teacher is also part of the team. So we try to we develop a plan to support the child. That plan could be, one-on-one tutoring, or it could be, checking in with a mentor. It all depends on what the student's needs are at that moment. We also have student study teams that can come out of cost, in which we meet with the parent and the teacher, and we discuss and some of our special ed team as well. And we really discuss the way that we can support the student and also to acknowledge their concerns. In the process of acknowledging some of the concerns, we really also want to focus on the strengths, because our students have come to us with a lot of strengths. And we want to acknowledge and foster those so that we can continue to support the child. It is not going to, we know as educators that it's not going to, we can't put a time frame on when our students are going to stop needing supports. We have to just begin the work, and we'll actually monitor what it is that we're doing. And the way we monitor, we have a cost form, our coordinator does, and we see what services or interventions our students are using. And then we move on to, if we move on to an SST, we check in, we do the SST, and then about 2 months later, we do a follow-up SST to determine where the student is at that point. So we continue to try to monitor, email the teachers to see where they are, if there's any new concerns as well that we need to be aware of. And we have our counselor. She will do check-ins with students and also one-on-one sessions as well. It is important for us to definitely keep lines of communication open with the families. If we don't do that, it can't be one-sided. We really have to partner up. And it's when we meet with the families, it's not, we take the approach of we're working together to support the student, and we're not pointing fingers or trying to find out what's going on that's making this situation what it is at that point. Something that I tell my staff is we really can't control what happens outside of school when they leave the gates, or right now when they shut down the computer. But we can definitely do our very best to make an environment where our students can thrive the moment they walk into the school or when they log on. And that's something that we can control to the best of our ability. Our staff, I definitely encourage them to be innovative and try, they'll come up with ideas. How do we try this for this student, And for us, the way I see it, if we don't try it, we'll never know. So let's go ahead and try different ways of supporting the student as well. And one of the things that I was talking to my staff and other colleagues is, as we look forward to the reopening day, we really have to be mindful that our students have gone through a lot this year, as well as our staff. And they're gonna need a lot of support, academic, social, and social emotional as well. And that's important to know, because we need to make sure that we're ready to support them. Our students in first grade, they've only been in school for half a year, and then we went into shelter in place. Our kindergarten TKers have not been in the building. So we're gonna have to teach our students not only the curriculum, but how to be students, how to be friends, how to be social, procedures and norms. So it's gonna be a lot of work, but it's something that we know it's coming, and we are definitely ready with the supports and the team to take on this opportunity for growth. And I think it's going to be an opportunity for growth for our students and for ourselves as well. So are there any questions? I know that Walt took more time, but
Ouch, Jorge. No, I'm kidding.
Jorge, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I know that sometimes you're looking around for where is that thing to raise my hand. So I don't want to rush anybody. So, yeah, Victoria.
Thanks, Kim. And I waited kind of on questions since I think some of them might be to both Jorge and Walt. But I'm wondering, like on learning hubs, for example, and you both have these systems of, and totally get that ideally we would have that sort of fluid nature, right? And that's really important for not only the most effective academic interventions, but also to avoid that sort of labeling and tracking, right, with kids. But on something like learning hubs and a lot of the practicalities, unfortunately, of offering offering more intensive interventions, there's that upstart, right? And so, for example, getting kids enrolled in a program, identified that they have those needs for something like learning hubs in the next couple weeks. How are sites, and I'm not sure, Jorge, if it's only elementary schools or if Walt, if we're going to do a learning hub at every school, but how are we going about identifying those students who I would assume would be in tier 3? And kind of what does that look like for us right now?
Okay, for at Patterson, we're looking at cost referrals. We're looking at students who have been referred to cost, and really looking at what the concerns were when they were referred. We're also checking in with teachers of those students to see if the concerns are still ongoing. And then we're also asking for teachers to do recommendations of any students they feel that they would benefit from being on school in the learning hubs. We know that we have limited space, and I know that we may extend an offer to a family and they may decline it as well. So we're creating a list large enough where we have room to bring more students on board if that's an opportunity as well. But we definitely are looking for teacher recommendations and also report cards to see how we can support them. And also at the same time, how we can, for the students looking at the students who might benefit from, being with peers. I think there's some students who have gone through some rough times being separated. And although it'll be a whole different approach, I think that it may benefit some students to at least be back on campus and have an adult there that can support them as well. So it's still ongoing. We just met this morning, and the conversation is gonna continue on how we can get some more names to better serve them.
And for us, it's very similar. So thank you for that question. That's an excellent question. But for us, it's very similar in that we're utilizing cost referrals, but not just cost referrals, because it's also, we're also have the benefit at junior high, middle school to be able to talk with our counselors as well. Our attendance clerk has been exceptionally helpful with the data part of it to determine which students are missing how many periods a day. So all of those things together have been very helpful. At some point, we will be able to, let teachers kind of see the lists and help us also make determinations. But similar to Jorge, we are, identifying a lot more students than we actually have ability to accommodate, because we know some students, there is such a thing as family choice. Families may or may not, they may not want to have their students on campus at this point. So, we also have to allow for family choice. But great question. Very similar processes. Yeah.
And may I jump in too and just clarify that the learning hubs are being crafted for students for whom being on campus, being in a stable internet environment is going to make the difference to them being able to access their own distance learning. The adults that are in those rooms are not there as tutors. They're there just to make sure that students are able to access the distance learning just as they were accessing it from home, but it's there to facilitate those students who are struggling in that way. Okay, I'm going to take Shilpa's question, and then what I'm going to do, I think, is drop you into some breakout rooms for just a couple minutes and give you a chance to kind of just have a little bit of conversation and talk this over. So Shilpa, go ahead.
Just quickly on what you said. So if the learning hubs are not being supervised by someone who can some basic questions or how to do something during async time, how will the students find support?
So I didn't mean to imply that the people who were there wouldn't be able to help with basic questions. They can, but it's not like saying we're going to bring together a room that's all third grade students and we're going to have a credentialed third grade teacher there in that room to be sort of teaching them third grade live. The room may very well have students from a variety of different grades. They may have students from a variety of different classrooms. So will that adult be able to come side by side with that student and say, hey, what are you struggling with? Oh, I'm having trouble figuring this out. Okay, well, let's see if we can work on that together. Absolutely, they'll be able to do that. But it's a little bit different from a targeted grade level specific, say, academic intervention that we would talk about with the pyramids.
Okay, thank you.
All right, what I'm going to do is now have you drop into some breakout rooms just for an opportunity to kind of talk about what you've heard and see if there are other pieces of information that you might be interested in knowing. You know me, you never can go into a breakout room without a place to write things down. So I'm going to, put into the chat a set of, or a slide deck like we've worked on in the past. And when you get into your breakout room, if you just want to jot some notes in there, you're welcome. And if you just want to have a conversation, you're also welcome to do that. We're getting a little bit on in our time. So I'm probably going to just have us in our breakout rooms, maybe about 6 minutes or so. And I think what I'll do is create about 4 breakout rooms, and that would put about something like 5 people in each breakout room. So just an opportunity to kind of talk about what you heard or mull it over or wonder with your partners. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and open these up and enjoy your conversation. We'll see you back in about 6 minutes. Hopefully you had an opportunity to just do a little bit of talking, maybe ask questions of one another, and hopefully we had people in each room who were able to answer some of your questions. One of the questions that came up in the room that I happened to pop into had to do with how much each school is responsible for all of their own interventions and how much of it is district-wide. And I know Victoria had asked a similar kind of a question earlier on. So there are certain processes. For example, you heard both Mr. Lewis and Mr. Gonzalez talk about the COST team. COST is an acronym for Coordination of Services Team, and it's COST teams exist at every one of our sites. They are overseen by our district student support services, and the purpose of a COST team is to bring together a really diverse team of expertise to take a look at why a student might be struggling and figure out interventions that could happen. So the fact that COST exists, the fact that it meets regularly, the processes they use, those are district-wide standard. But then what an individual school may do in response to the findings of a COST team, of course, depends on the resources that are available at that individual school. So that's just one example of where we cross from being a district process to being very unique and individualized for each school. And there are some couple of other things that we talked about. We have counselors at all of our schools. And so there is consistency about the way social emotional issues are approached. The counselors come together regularly and meet with counselors from other schools. And so there's some standardization there. But again, once they get to the schools, the kind of work they do is very often done in conjunction with them talking to their principal. Hello there. Talking to their principal about what an individual student needs or what a class may need. So there again is a place where we've moved from a system-wide answer down to an individual answer at a school. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information about that. It's a much bigger question, but that gives you just a couple ideas. All right, so this was just a quick brush with intervention. As you know, as we get ready to close down our meeting, we'll talk about what is it that we want to talk about at the next meeting. And of course, if you feel like you've heard enough about intervention and you've got kind of an idea how it works, we can move on to our next topic next month. And if you feel like, no, we really need to continue to take a deeper dive in this, we can make that decision in just a few minutes. But before we do that, I want to address the motion that was made toward the end of the meeting last month, and that was that we form a subcommittee to review resources on racism. And I know we fine-tuned the language on that in our minutes earlier on today. But I did, since the committee voted to want to have this subcommittee, I did want to open it up for a little bit of discussion. And I think what I would first like to do would be to hear from you all what you think the purpose of that subcommittee would be. What product is it that we would be generating as a subcommittee? Because unless we have some real, concrete goal that we're moving toward, it probably doesn't make sense to take time to meet. So I'd like to just go ahead and open up discussion and find out, well, first of all, I guess the question is, now that you've thought about it for a month, is it a subcommittee that you're interested in having us start? A subcommittee means it's not everybody, so you could choose to be part of it or you could choose not to be part of it. But before I ask you to make that decision, I would love to have us kind of clarify what it is that the purpose of that subcommittee would be. So is there anybody who'd like to speak to that? Yeah, Victoria.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, I'll just, speaking as a math teacher, I don't want to get left out of the fabulous work that you're doing with our English language arts teachers. And I think we absolutely, because of the amazing stories and that way that English literature resonates with students, of course, that's a natural place to go. But I really think that we need to do a deeper look throughout the curriculum and instruction. And this needs to be something that all educators and all schools, all curriculum it needs to kind of go beyond that. So for a subcommittee, I would like them to look, kind of do that looking certainly at what we do now, but come back and help this committee form some recommendations for the board
as to directions we might go for other areas of anti-racism.
Okay, and so then the product that you envision would be a report to the board to say, in addition to considering how we can weave equity into our core novels and our supplemental novels, here are other areas that the members of the committee feel deserve a look as well. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay, all right, so that's one thought. Anybody else have a different thought? Yes, Trustee Zhang. I think you might be on mute. I'm not hearing you.
So my question is, let's say we looked and then we have something, but how are we going to implement all this into a student's curriculum? Because now we have, what I mean is, you know, the content, how we're going to squeeze into this subject, whatever the thing you find, into the students' curriculum. They have a limited classes, right? And are you going to open another class? What I mean is, when you're looking at something, let's say social or anti-racism, and how you're going to implement, are you going to try to propose as a separate class, or are you going to kind of melt into a wave into a class?
And I'm going to maybe make a guess that until we know what it is that we identify as places where there's a need, it might be just a little bit premature to guess what that solution might be. Because in some cases, it's possible that the solution would be, gosh, the history materials that we currently work with haven't been updated in decades and don't really reflect current perspectives. So the recommendation there might be, we need to adopt more current curriculum. If, for instance, we found that there were concerns about, I don't know, how the restorative practices were being implemented, then there might be professional development that was needed as a remedy to that. So I feel like maybe the remedies would be step 2, but I'm just speaking on my own. I would be glad to hear other people's thoughts. And Shilpa, I see that you have your hand up.
My question, I don't know if it's a question or a suggestion. I'm thinking about it, but I feel like, and I had this discussion in our breakout room also, about equity. The more I read, it seems that assessment is a huge component to it, and the instructional style is a huge component to it. We might have the same content, but if the instruction and assessment are not similar, a huge gap in learning or grades or however we want to phrase it. So could that be a part of the subcommittee? I don't know. I'm just like throwing out a thought there. Or I don't know if that's part of the equity committee. If they look at rubrics assessment. I don't know how it works, but just a thought that assessments do need an instruction also. Not everybody will teach exactly the same. I totally understand that. Every teacher will bring in her or his or their own flavors, which is needed. But at the same time, I think I have personally, as a parent, seen very, very different styles in high school. I've had some very interesting teachers, discussions with teachers on how the problem is right, but it didn't meet the expectation of the teacher. So even though it was math, it didn't work out. When there are multiple ways of doing math, and as long as it's mathematically correct, it should be an accepted answer. So how do we combat that situation? It doesn't matter so much in elementary school, but I think by the time you reach high school, those differences start creating huge variations for the students.
Okay, so I hear you. So you're interested in assessment and the impact that that has on equity and outcomes for students. Not that that shouldn't be the focus of this committee. It might well be the focus of this subcommittee. Just as a note, assessment and grading practices was the topic that the committee felt most interested in for next month. So
Okay.
it is something that we'll take a deeper dive into next month as well. Stacy, go ahead.
Okay.
So my whole thought too with this committee is I know that right now in elementary, it's kind of is more standardized with the benchmark curriculum. But I would like to see this committee kind of send out, like, not necessarily a survey to every site, but maybe to a site admins. I would be interested in seeing, like, okay, out of all of these core literature lists and supplemental lists, what books are actually being used? And then that way, because we can look at a list and make sure that it is equitable, has a little bit of everything. But if every teacher is always using just the core material because that's what's provided, we're using this one type of type of book. Sorry, I've got one more meeting tonight to get through. But like if it's all just literature but no poem or whatnot, is that really meeting the needs of all of our students? And I think this would be a good use of this committee to kind of take some of that data and says, okay, so we can make recommendations to any adoption committees or any committees looking at supplemental material or core material. I've noticed that everyone uses this book and this book and this book, and they're all very similar. What can we get the most bang out of one of these books, and then maybe try to implement one of the other ones so that we are more equitable and racially and more equal to kind of so that everybody's in a way is representative. I mean, it's very hard to represent every single student, parent in this district, but I know that we are trying our hardest to represent everyone. But just because we put it on a list, is it actually being used?
Okay, so thank you very much. We're getting close to the end of our time, and what I'm hearing is that we have really diverse perspectives on what that subcommittee might do. So here's what I'm going to ask. In the next half a month, will you email to me your thoughts about, if you have them, and you don't have to email if you don't have them, but your thoughts about what you'd like to see the subcommittee address. And we had 3 different kind of what feel to me like very different suggestions. Victoria suggested we might look at other curricular areas for where equity might be addressed. Shilpa, and rightly so, realizes that assessment can be a spot where tremendous inequity gets built into education. And then Stacy was mentioning that she's interested in the connection between the core and supplemental novels that are being proposed and what people are using. So all 3 great ideas, but probably diverse enough that if we tried to pull a committee together to address all 3, it would be more than what's reasonable to do. So here's what I'm going to ask. If you have an idea for what you'd like to see that subcommittee address, will you please email it to me in the next 2 weeks? I'm going to assemble that into a survey. I'm going to pass that back out to everybody and people can vote. Yes, I think this is valuable, not so much on this. And then also let me know whether it's something you'd be interested in being part of or not. I'll bring that data back to the committee next month and we'll see if we can't get this sub task force put together with a really clear focus on the work that you want to do. Does that seem like that would be okay? Yeah. Artie, go ahead.
Kimberly, I was wondering if we have like clarity from the board on how we could be most helpful. I don't know if we want that sort of perspective on it. Like they might be trying to tackle something for many years, for example, and they might have something that they could propose. I'm just wondering if that might also be a way we could look at it.
Trustee Zhang and Prasad, could I ask you guys to email me and share your thoughts on the kinds of input that you'd like to hear from this committee?
Yeah, sure, will do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Artie. Great suggestion. All right, we're almost done for today. So I just want to kind of do a couple things to wrap up. As we're working our way through the topics from our survey, next month's topic would be assessment and grading. We did, but I don't want to rush you through the topic of intervention. So if what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to ask people to give me a vote. Let's see. So if If you are ready to have us move on to assessment and grading, would you go ahead and raise your hand as a vote to move on? And you can do it either with your physical hand if you want, or you can raise it with your hand over here. I say over here with your. All right, so it looks to me like the majority of people are ready to move on to assessment and grading. Okay, so our next meeting is going to be similar in some ways to this, in that I'll be talking to you about assessment and grading, what kinds of things are, give you a little bit of philosophical background on it, talk about what kinds of things we are doing in Fremont Unified. Our equity committee, amazingly enough, woohoo, is finally off the ground. And so I think Stacy's going to be attending a meeting maybe tomorrow. Right, Stacy, the equity committee.
As soon as this meeting is over.
Oh, okay. As soon as we are quiet, off she goes. And so next month, Stacy, you can report back to us about how that equity committee went. And thank you again for representing the C&I committee. And then the last thing, I just want to say here. Thank you to Shilpa for taking our minutes today. We really appreciate your volunteering to do that. Is there anyone who would like to be our minute taker for our next meeting next month? All right, I'm just not going to let you go eat your dinner until somebody volunteers. No, I'm kidding. If somebody over the course of the month wakes up in the middle of the night and goes, you know what would be a great new learning experience for me? I would like to take minutes for a committee meeting. Let me know. And Shilpa, thank you so much. We really appreciate your taking care of that tonight. So
I'm going to let you read them. If you approve them, if you think they were detailed or not too detailed, or I'll take them next time. I just don't know if they're worthy. So if you say they were good enough, I'll take it. Not a problem.
Perfect. I would be happy to do that and give you feedback. And thank you so much for your willingness to do that. All right, everybody.
Tim, I'm sorry, I raised my hand, but I'm not sure if you can see it. I would like to agendize at the next meeting as well, just a little bit of clarity about what the committee, I think it's kind of following up on what RT asked too about the trustees. So I feel like we got this great presentation today from Jorge and Walt, but is the primary purpose of this committee to just learn about various topics, or should we then kind of explore enough to make recommendations to further improve the district, because that is what our bylaws note. So I had asked a little bit earlier too, because LCAC will need the data on what district-wide systematic interventions are currently taking place, and kind of just taking that so we can see and present that to the board, or if they have something on intervention coming up that we would be able to make some sort of recommendation. So it might not take up the whole meeting, but is that data that the district might be able to get you for us to be able to see at the next meeting, even if that's only 20 minutes or so.
So if I understand, what you'd like to do is agendize a conversation about what the trustees would feel was most valuable from us, or you're interested in our prioritizing information about funding that is related to interventions that could then be carried into the LCAC committee. I'm a little bit fuzzy about where we're going.
Sure. We already have in our bylaws that we should be learning and then making recommendations to the board. If the board trustees, of course, want to weigh in, of course, on that discussion, that makes perfect sense. Especially, it's awesome to have 2 new trustees. So to hear about what kind of things they would like to be getting back from committees, that would be great. But I think that discussion on how we can actually be in line with our bylaws, and like today, if we spent time on intervention, we learned, but do we take that forward to better the district, or do we feel satisfied that the district is doing all that we possibly
can on intervention, and that's why we're moving on. So I just want to kind of avoid doing the mile wide and an inch deep, and build on what awesome things that we're doing. So to what extent is, is it district wide? I don't think funding necessarily needs to be part of this committee. I think we can make recommendations that don't have to do with spending money, because we already have things like as finances allocated. But is that something that you would be able to get just information on for interview?
And Victoria, unfortunately, at least for me, I'm losing your audio, so I'm having a little bit of trouble. Could you and I have a conversation offline, maybe? And I think we could definitely agendize something. I just need to have clarity about what it is. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll take one more hand from Artie, and I know we're already over time, so then I'm going to let you all go. Yes, hi, Artie.
Hi, Kimberly. And so it might be that I'm a new committee member, and so I'm a little lost on some of the topics. I feel like it would help if there was more metrics, maybe, on how big the problem is and what attributes the problems have, so that we can triage and think more deeply about the bigger issues. So for me, it's feeling a little like, yes, we're doing interventions, but like even the clarity on, is it just for gen ed, or is it all the kids? Is it, at what point does what kick in? That kind of a clarity. I don't know if we need to have it, but how can the committee help is where I'm going with it. So it would really help if there were measures, if there were some way of knowing that this is the worst and this is the best that we can do. There isn't, so it's a little vague for me how I can help.
Okay, I appreciate your feedback. All right, everybody, have a good evening. Stay safe, and we will see you all next month.
Thank you.